I always say, speak to the king. And basically, when we were at just the devastation in our marriage, we were separated. It was not going well. And I found myself only focused on what he did wrong. I would speak to, I wouldn't say, it sounds very harsh to say the idiot, the fool, but I would speak to the fool, and I got more fool. So when you speak to the king, and you're not hyper-focused on everything they do wrong, but you're focused on the gratitude, you're focused on the positive things and what they bring to the marriage and just who they are as a person, their character, and you start speaking to that, you speak to the king, you start getting more king.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Primal Question podcast. I'm Mike Foster, and our whole goal with these conversations that we have on the podcast is to help you better understand the core drivers of who you are, to help you in your relationships, help you understand yourself, help you understand your gifts, and hopefully just improve your life all around when we actually know some of that hidden programming within us. And so today's topic, I'm really excited because we're going to get really practical and applicable, because we're going to talk about relationships and how that plays out, especially in our romantic relationships, whether you're married, dating, engaged, whatever type of romantic relationship you're in right now. I believe the conversations we're about to have are going to be incredibly helpful. And I'm also really pumped because we have my good friend, Jen Johnson, with us today. Jen is, I guess what I would call an intimacy coach. She's also a Primal Question certified coach. She's trained in the model of the Primal Question, but her goal is to help couples connect. And she has a coaching practice called Living Reframed. And I love Jen's insights on relationships, and I'm really excited for you to hear from her. So quick, hi, Jen. How are you? Glad to have you here.
I'm so excited to be here.
We love having you here. I also want to introduce our master coach, Leigh. Probably know Leigh from a couple podcasts that we've already done, but Leigh's joined us for the conversation. She's going to bring her expertise and wisdom also. And guys, let's just dive in. So, Jen, I want to throw you the first question and just ask you, what do you see? Number one, relationships are complicated. Yeah. Lots of challenges. In your line of work and when you're working with couples, what is the most common problem or challenge that a couple is facing that you see over and over again in your work?
I think misunderstandings. I think you can have the exact same situation, whether it's an argument or lifestyle, or, it could be small situation or a bigger scale. But a lot of times what I see is the exact same situation and two completely different perceptions. And a lot of times we think, okay, if I'm perceiving this situation, this conversation, this setting, whatever the case may be, if I'm perceiving it this way, then this must be what my partner is feeling. And it honestly rarely works out that way. It's typically a completely different perception. And that's what's so fun about, bringing couples together. Even just really all it takes is one partner to be able to kind of zoom back, reframe, hence, living reframed, and just reframe reframe not so much their perception, but the situation, and being open to, could there possibly be a different perception of the exact same situation? Doesn't mean you agree with the facts, the difference in facts and things like that. It just means that could there possibly be a different perception? So that's honestly, I feel like that's probably the most common thing, whether it's intimacy, parenting, arguing, communication. So many times it comes down to different perceptions.
Do you now you're married and share a lot about your relationship online, and talk to me about like how this is applied for you, just like a misunderstanding with your husband that you needed to reframe. Is there a recent example?
Oh man, like we're gonna get personal.
Why not? That's what we're here for.
We have to do this every day. And to be honest, setting out to be a marriage coach or an intimacy coach, I think at some point I thought, I can't do this because my relationship has to be perfect. And we've since learned that doesn't exist. Let's just put that on the table. Yeah. And we have to do this every day. I would say most recently is a big storm came through. We're cleaning up stuff. Andy's working all day. I'm doing the grunt physical work, and then he has days off. So he's exhausted. And I'm like, come on, buddy, let's go. Like, we're on a roll. We got the chainsaw going, and same situation. And I'm looking at it like, this is a privilege to own a property and to own land that we have to clean up. And he's like, I'm exhausted. I've been working, 5 10-hour shifts. And so even just something simple like that, we both had to reframe and go, whoa, same exact situation. Could there possibly be a different perception? And I had to humble myself. Usually it requires humility. And I had to humble myself and go, oh, wait, I actually can't even imagine working 5 10-hour shifts on my feet all day and then coming home to this mess. So we both had to and he had to kind of step back and say, oh, wow, I can't imagine trying to juggle your at-home business and take care of so it's just same situation, stepping back and reframing and going, could there be a different perception than the one I'm feeling right now? So yeah, that's probably the most recent, but we have to do it all the time, yes. All the time, because we are very different people, very, very different people. And thank God for that. But at times it doesn't always feel like a blessing.
No, totally. I think, and I love the idea that this is a constant work. This is a daily work of stepping back, stepping out of the story for a moment, finding a different perspective, looking for a new perspective. And I think, if you are in a relationship and you are sensing a lot of frustration with your partner, you're irritated, maybe you're going to the point of anger, the reframe is the pathway. Yes. It's not getting them to change. It's not, being passive aggressive. It's not all the other things that we try to use in our relationships to fix our frustrations. Yep. It really does require a reframe. But I love your point that it requires humility.
Yeah. And your goal is not to get them on your side. You're not trying to coerce each other to get on each other's side. The goal is to have a good conversation, to have it positive and to have it end well. And and of course, your primal question, that just brings to light all the opposites.
Well, Leigh, let me throw it to you, because I'd be curious on what you have to say about this, because, in Primal Question, we talk a lot about understanding our core need, and there's a need that is driving our life. And when that need is met, or we get a yes to that primal question, life is good, our relationships are good, we probably feel very connected to our partner. But when it's met with a no, we feel very distant and disconnected from our partner. So I'm curious about, why do you think it's so hard for couples who are committed to each other, who clearly love each other, who are invested in each other? I've been married for 29 years now, and I still struggle to communicate my core need to my spouse. Why is it so hard for couples to share that?
Well, I really think it comes back to our experiences. We're two different people. We have major differences in our experiences. We grew up for many years without each other. And early in childhood, often when that imprint of a primal question comes on us as individuals, we enter into this marriage or this relationship, and we have all of those life experiences, and they don't align until we bring this awareness, as we've talked about in the past, Mike, this awareness to what that primal question is, and communicate and continue to work at it. But I really think the reason why we don't land is because, one, we might not know that there's a need there. So that's the first thing. We've got to figure that out. And two, our experiences are so different that it's hard often for us to come together when we don't express what those experiences have been and why we are the way we are. Until we're able to do that, things are quite challenging. But it really comes back to our experiences and how we view the world, our perception of things.
Yeah, that's really good. One of the things I think is very true and somewhat liberating as I thought about my own relationship with my wife is there's a lot of books out there that talk about love, like the need of being loved. And I think that's really true. I think love's a really important part of relationships. And that would be question 3 on the Primal Question, am I loved? But I actually have been in many ways, like we tell people what their needs are. You need to feel loved. Maybe even now men need to be respected. Like we kind of put these needs on people, and not that those aren't incorrect or like not true, but understanding actually the core need in your relationship. See, my core need is not love or respect. It's safety. Okay. And I got to be able to communicate that. And I always joke, like, I don't really care if my wife loves me. Okay. That's not like, it's important, right? I say that kind of in a joking manner, but safety, I need to feel a sense of safety with my wife. And that's the need that she's meeting. But if we don't have that language, we don't understand that about ourselves, then how is our spouse ever supposed to meet that? Or our spouse would be going, well, I'm loving you. I'm loving you. I'm loving you. I'm answering that primal question of question 3. I love you. But it's like, yeah, but that's not my question. Or,
Right.
So again, I think this is where this work is really important. Get to the core need, name it, and then have the discussion. Jen, talk to me about how you actually use this idea of giving clarity to that core need for couples, helping them see that, be kind of that revelation moment, like, oh my gosh, that is the thing that's driving me. And that is the thing that my spouse keeps answering no to, which is creating all this conflict. Talk to me how you use that in your work.
Well, it's incredibly powerful because I think a lot of times, and I think you say this in the book, is when we know our question, or maybe we don't even know our question, but when we have that highest emotional need that we've become an absolute expert at, we kind of overextend that to everyone that we love. Mm-hmm. So if we are a Q3, we're going to make sure that our spouse just feels so much love. And like you just said, the spouse is like, I don't need this. This is not what I need right now. But we're thinking, why aren't you responding to this? Because I'm giving you, but we're really giving it out of our own need and our own highest emotional need, and not being aware of what their need is. And so it is such a game changer. What I love about applying their primal question, their highest emotional need when it comes to couples, is it reframes the entire conversation. I always use this example with my clients. Andy's a fly fisherman, loves fishing, eats, breathes, and lives it. And we live on, right off of a highway that is very windy, and it follows a creek that has trout in it. I'm a Q1. Am I safe? And a lot of times he will be looking in the river while he's driving, and he's looking for fish. We're hitting
multitasking here.
We're hitting the rumble strips, and he's just looking for the shiny object in the river, and I'm thinking I'm going to die. And so I use this example all the time because prior to really being educated and learning and having these tools, we would get to our trailhead or wherever we were going, and I would just be like, you drive like an idiot. I wouldn't say that, but I would certainly insinuate it. And now I can reframe that whole conversation and say, look, this is actually about my need, not your flaw, not the way you drive. Mm-hmm. This is actually more about, I'm feeling very unsafe when we hit the rumble strips. And so it's not me criticizing him. It's not me blaming him. It's more putting a highlight on what my need is and helping him see in a way, because he is, shocker, am I good enough? Mm. So if we get there and I'm criticizing his driving, well, now it's over. The day's over. Nobody's going to have any fun.
Yeah, lots of no's happening there.
Lots of no's. We're emphatic no's happening. And that's, you just can't get anywhere when you're basically not literally screaming, but underneath it feels like you're screaming a no to each other's highest emotional needs. So I think it really helps reframe the conversation and say, look, this is more about my need, not your flaw. And it's pretty powerful because it almost acts like a mediator. It's a little bit of a third party in the conversation so that neither party feels criticized or attacked or, anything like that.
Yeah, it creates ownership, right? Instead of me blaming my spouse for something, it's really like, I just want to take ownership of a need that I have. And I want to clarify that and participate with you in answering this with a yes. And I think a lot of times there is sometimes this belief or this fantasy that we have in our relationships that it's our spouse's responsibility to meet all of our needs, right?
Unfortunately.
Yeah.
Thank you, Disney. Thank you, Jerry Maguire.
Yeah. Not going to happen. Actually setting yourself up for a lot of suffering in your relationship.
Yeah.
But it is important to communicate your needs, but not in a way of blaming our spouse for their not meeting it, but talking and taking ownership of this is the need and how do we go about getting more yeses to this question. So Leigh, how would you help a couple do that? Like, let's say they know their primal question is like, my need is safety, or my need is love, my need is success, my need is purpose. They identify it.
Yeah.
How can they then express that to their spouse? And maybe you can even say, use your own relationship, your own marriage as an example. Because I know you're a Q7. Do I have purpose? So how do you communicate that to your hubby?
Well, we're a little bit unique, Mike, as we both, my husband and I, have the same primal question.
Yes, that's right. Lucky you guys. Why is that significant? Just share with the audience, like why that is significant and why that's a bit of a bonus for your relationship.
Well, what I spoke about just a bit ago, how we have different experiences. So my husband and I are both Q7s, but how we arrived at our do I have purpose question was very different. He grew up in the church, and it was well-meaning, but it was placed on him that he could fulfill his purpose, his God-given purpose in any way. And it could have been a beautiful thing, but as a child, he took that on to believe, I have to go find my purpose. Mine was a little bit different. And my family, in the same regards, they told me things like, you just need to find out who you are. And as a 5-year-old little girl, I then had to go find out who I was, and I didn't know what that meant. And so my whole life, that's what I've been trying to figure out, because they put a lot of emphasis on that. And different experiences. And so we both arrived at this Q7, but it shows up different for us. And so coaching ourselves and couples. So when we identified our primal question, that was a big revelation for us. And we thought at first, as I'm sure a lot of couples do, oh my goodness, we now know this about each other. This is going to change everything. And it did, but there was more that needed to be done. It wasn't just identifying the primal question. We had to uncover the triggers, right? Or what our scramble, we call it our scramble behavior, really looks like. Because my scramble, when I feel like I don't have purpose, is to develop a plan as fast as possible. And I'm going to have A, B, C, and D. I'm going to have it all outlined. And that is how I keep myself safe in my scramble. I'm going to get my purpose done by having an outline. My husband, no, that's not how he solves his scramble. His scramble is he will dream and dream and dream and dream and dream, but feel like he doesn't ever, get anything. And I just want to fix it. I'm like, well, let's come up with a plan. He's like, no, I need to stay in this dreaming phase a little bit, and I'll tell you when I'm ready. So his trigger is dreaming until the cows come home. And my trigger is, well, I'm just going to plan everything. And neither one is great.
Yeah, you can see those two scrambles coming together. That could be problematic.
It's problematic, but same primal question. So we had to uncover unconsciously how we answer this. We had to figure out our trigger. And then once we did that, and this is what, do with couples as well, then we get to figure out, well, how do we get a yes to my primal question? How do I want to get a yes from him? And how can he get a yes from me to his and my primal question of, do I have purpose? And we had to understand how to not answer unintentionally with a no, but also guide ourselves and guide other couples to create specific actions to answer a yes to each other's needs.
That's so good. Love that. Jen, I want to ask you, I saw something on your Instagram account, and I just, I encourage everybody listening, make sure to follow Jen. She's a great follow. Just always love your honesty, always love your candidness about relationships, and it's super helpful. But one of the things you said on there, and I want to have you chime in on this because I think it's really important, is and I'm going to read your post. It says, nobody gets to stay married to the person they said their vows to. And I'd love for you to talk about that a little bit, this whole idea of the ever-changing part of our relationships and who we are as people, and how important that is to keep that concept in mind.
Yep. Oh, it actually goes so deep, but I always kind of visually encourage couples, like, don't hold on so tightly to who you think you married. Like, we don't own our spouse. They're just, I always like to say they're kind of on loan to us. We have no ownership there. And sometimes we like to squeeze so tight that we don't allow that other person to grow. A couple of things that really came together for this whole concept and this whole idea of that post. One is, when we got married, I had just turned 19 and my husband was 25. Between 19 and 28, those are really formidable years in change for both men and women. I think especially for women. And I've always been so grateful that Andy allowed me to explore my talents, my gifts, my likes, my dislikes. Like, he never held too closely on who he married. You know, he really gave me freedom to become who I was supposed to become. That was the first part, because I run into couples where that's not the case, where they are not encouraged to, follow their likes and dislikes.
Hey friend, you and I have a hidden force driving our lives. It drives our choices, our behaviors, our triggers, our relationships, and even our strengths and our gifts. And most of us have no idea what it is or how to control it. And this hidden force is an unmet emotional need. There are 7 of them, and I call them the 7 primal questions. And when you don't know your primal question, it can wreak havoc on your life because people will do whatever it takes to meet this need. And we can even try to meet that need in some pretty unhealthy ways. But when you identify your core emotional need, a lot of things begin to make sense. And you'll have the clarity to meet emotional needs for yourself and others in much healthier ways that have far-reaching effects on your life and your relationships. Take 5 minutes to discover your primal question today at primalquestion.com.
The other kind of funny aspect to this is I had a post that went viral 2 years ago, and there was a comment that kept getting repeated in there, and it was, women always like to change their husbands. They always like to change their husband. And it, I don't know, I tapped into the Bitter Husband network or something because they were just like all over this video. And I thought it was so interesting because I thought, well, what a funny concept, because our husbands are always changing. We're not trying to change our husbands. They're always changing, just like we are. We're always changing. And so I love the healthy relationship, like a healthy marriage. I love picturing 2 people that are always growing, and not like never resting and being okay with stuff, but just constantly challenging themselves to grow in their thoughts, to grow in their education, to grow in their intimacy. To, like, if we just sit still, I'm looking at shrubs and trees. If they don't get water and they don't get sun, they're going to die. Like if we just sit still and we never grow, everything is going to die. That's just the way nature works. So if we're not intentionally growing, then it's actually going to be like apathy. It's going to be the opposite. So I just really love the idea of, look, I'm so curious about the things. Andy's super into a very popular podcast right now, and he'll come home and he'll be like, you got to hear this. You got to hear this podcast. This one's only 3 hours. I'm like, who is this? But instead of feeling like, who are you? I become so wildly curious of like, who is this 53-year-old podcast, 3-hour podcast man that I am married to? Like, who are you? So when you can reframe it, it gets kind of fun because you're like, who am I married to? And it's not quite that drastic, but just holding on loosely to new things they're into, new revelations they've had, new wants they have, maybe in the bedroom, maybe, just always holding on loosely to them and be wildly curious about who they're becoming, because we have to fall in love with this new person. We don't get to be like, he's not the same person I married. Well, thank God, because he was 25. This is not a bad thing, they're different. They're not the same. She's not the same woman. Yeah, I hope so. I hope none of us are the same that we were 20 years ago.
Yeah.
So it's just looking at that and just being wildly curious about this person we're married to. You wake up and we're like, all right, who are we today?
Well, I think you bring up a really the bitter spouse cohort online. One of the things we actually talked about this a couple of weeks ago in the Primal Question certification program on one of our masterclass Mondays. The whole idea of a complaint, if we have a complaint, that a complaint is actually revealing a need, right? Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of times it's easier just to complain versus addressing the actual need that is driving the complaint. There's a lot of vulnerability in talking about our needs. There's a lot of risk. There's, we have to actually understand ourselves in a better way and clarify that need. So sometimes, there's nothing wrong with complaints, but if it's just complaining or complaint for complaint's sake, and we never actually look at the thing that's driving the complaint, the actual need, which is really important and needs to be discussed, then really we're tolerating a situation. We're just going to continue it versus actually dealing with the deeper need. So Jen, what would you say to you talk about growth and how important, growing, curiosity, discovering new things about your spouse, trying new things, all that kind of stuff. What happens if you're in a relationship, and I know this has happened, I'm sure, in your coaching practice, where one partner is all about growth and change and the other partner is like, nope. Yep. What do you do then? Because I know there's people are listening right now. It's like, my spouse won't join me in this growth. They don't.
It's honestly a very dangerous position to be in your relationship, because then you end up getting a little bit of a self-righteousness of, the curse of knowledge, when you learn something and you're like, everybody should know this, or, everyone should be on my level now that I'm enlightened. But it happens within a relationship where you've got one person that's like goal driven and they're learning new things. Spiritually, I see it more spiritually than anything in my couples, where one couple's really leaning into God and the other one's like, I'm good. This gap does not have to be a bad thing, but it does end up, if you're not careful and you're focused on, I need someone else. So when we start criticizing their character because they're not at the same growth rate, that's when it becomes dangerous. But when we keep in mind this spouse that may not be as excited to grow at the same rate or in the same direction as you, they still have amazing, beautiful values that they offer, and you still have this opportunity to complement each other. as long as we don't go off the edge of, this is not going to work, I'm going way ahead, I'm going to leave them behind, it's unattractive that they don't want to grow, I need someone else that wants to grow with me, I need a go-getter like I am. We start to think like we want someone like we are. I know I don't want anyone like me. It would not work. So that's where I think the danger comes in, is when you start to you lose your humility, you start to look down on that. That's why I always say being wildly curious about who they are, because there's something that we all have different personalities. My husband's not huge he can't stand personal development books. It's not his thing. But I could see if we were in an unhealthy marriage, how I would be like, you don't like personal development, you don't want to grow. I need someone who wants to grow. You can kind of see how it would create a chasm. But if you can stay humble and see how they complement you in the differences in that, it actually works beautifully when you stay wildly curious. And I used to get really frustrated thinking my way was the effective way. There are some things I still believe that, but like when it comes to the dishwasher or whatever, like my way is the right way. And now, again, wildly curious. I am so wildly curious why you load the dishwasher that way. There must be some advantage that I've been missing out, just trying to reframe that whole thing. And now it's like, and obviously the three of us know the dishwasher is not the issue. It's the deeper issue. The dishwasher is the branches. We know that. But I'm kind of diverting. But anyway, I think seeing that as not a threat to your relationship, that gap, but seeing it as, wow, this is actually a beautiful thing that, if I can humble myself and be wildly curious about what they do love and what does make them tick and come into their world. I often encourage couples, if your husband played soccer in college, create a date where you set up nets in the backyard and get a soccer ball out. Let him show off his skills. Don't let him hurt himself, but it's amazing what it would do for a man and even a woman when they get to show off things that they're really good at, because couples find themselves in positions where they're just complaining about what their spouse is not good at. So I'm totally
so good. Yeah, no, I love that. I love that. Leigh, what are your thoughts on that? Just the idea of like when your spouse is not wanting to grow and you are, or your spouse is not wanting to change and you are, what would your counsel be? What would you add?
Yeah, I agree with everything that Jen said, and what it comes down to, and the reason why people are seeking out coaching, while they might be struggling in their marriage, or they're saying, well, I'm here because my husband or my wife, X, Y, and Z. But what our coaching can do is help us realize that it's about us in a sense, and what we need to uncover about ourselves. And then we are able to meet our spouse with what Jen was saying, with this curiosity. But until we work on the things and why we're unhappy with whatever it is that they are doing or not doing, we will never get to that place of being curious. We have to figure out, why am I so angry? Why am I so frustrated? Why am I in my scramble, before we are able to step into that curiosity. So it really just goes back to coaching people and coaching ourselves, because we're always coaching ourselves in being curious actually first about us.
Yeah, yes. So good.
Yeah, our spouse is often just a mirror to our own inner work that is still yet to be done. Yes. And being aware of that. And it gives us a great place of ownership and empowerment, because if we think the solution is through our spouse changing or doing something different, then we're going to just create unnecessary frustration. And so anytime a person be looking like, what is it within me? Why am I so irritated with the way that he loads the dishwasher? Why am I so frustrated with this particular thing? And start there. And not to say that there isn't a conversation to have or some partnering in change that can happen around something that might be going on in your relationship. But first and foremost, start with the curiosity. I was actually coaching somebody today, and they were very frustrated with their spouse, his spouse's fixed mindset. Okay, just kind of not wanting to grow, not wanting to. And this guy's a really mover and shaker, big dreamer, visionary, great entrepreneur. And one of the things that I encouraged him to do is certainly notice his complaints right around that and what need is underneath the complaint. But I also encouraged him, as you guys have talked about the idea of curiosity, one of the things we talked about was gratitude.
Yes.
And I encouraged him just to spend a few minutes talking. I heard the complaints, and I think the complaints are worthy, and I'm not dismissing the complaints. But I invited him to talk to me about the things that he was grateful for in his partner, and to begin to list 4 or 5 things. And that's a really, gratitude just changes the whole energy in not only a conversation, but within a relationship. And
Absolutely.
so we have to be aware of our partner's shortcomings. We have to certainly, and we're actually pretty good at that. I know what you don't do very well, Mrs. Foster. And probably not as dialed into our own shortcomings. I'm not sure what you fail at, Mr. Foster, in the relationship, because I think you're doing a pretty good job. That's the way. That's how I talk to myself. But finding those positive, finding the gratitude, finding the way. We really parent well together. We're very aligned on our finances. You know what? She's really, really committed to. Again, I just look at 29 years. I'm like, where am I going to find that? Where am I going to find that level of commitment? Someone who's going to go on a 29-year commitment with me. Like, that's pretty, like, I'm so grateful for that. Just that one thing. Right. And so encouraging couples, for sure, like, get curious. And then maybe a secondary kind of tool that we can use would be gratitude.
Yeah. Well, and I always say, speak to the king, which I apply it to, we have 4 teenage boys, adult. Can't really say teenage anymore. Some of them are adults now. But, I always say, speak to the king. And basically, when we were at the devastation in our marriage, we were separated. It was not going well. I found myself, what you focus on grows. We've all heard that. Mm-hmm. And I found myself only focused on what he did wrong. And because it was out of my hurt. So my hurt was trying to make it better in its unhealthy ways. And I would speak to, I wouldn't say, it sounds very harsh to say the idiot, the fool, but I would speak to the fool, and I got more fool.
Right.
So when you speak to the king and you're not hyper-focused on everything they do wrong, but you're focused on the gratitude, you're consciously making a decision to focus on the positive things and what they bring to the marriage and just who they are as a person, their character. And you start speaking to that, you speak to the king, you start getting more king. And it happens with my boys too, where, I don't focus on what they did not do and, their laundry or whatever. I start to focus on, their character. And I focus and speak to the things that I want to see more of. And it's crazy how powerful it is.
Mm-hmm. And that's so good. Leigh, any thoughts on that? Just speaking to the king or
That was powerful, Jen. And it's so true. It's so true. That language, we level up to whatever it is we're saying to ourselves. So that a reframe of things that, that we need in ourselves, but then the reframe of to our spouse and speaking that language, that king and queen language, they're going to be like, oh my goodness, they see me, they love me, they make me feel safe. They are speaking to my primal question. When we do that, when we know what their primal question is, I absolutely love that. And you're right, Mike, it starts with gratitude. We have to be able to list out that gratitude to then be able to speak it out into existence over our spouse, and they will level up. Because we're leveling up at the same time.
Yes.
And it has to be genuine, not manipulative.
Absolutely. 100%. It's got to be genuine. But the reframe, really reframing, like how does heaven see him? How does God see him?
Yeah.
How do, how would he want to see himself? What does he want to hear? What does she want to hear?
What do other people say about them? That's always a really powerful thing.
Good.
I love about what all Andy's patients think of him at the pharmacy. And it just makes me so happy because everyone loves him so much. So if I'm getting a little irritated, I'll be like, what does everyone else say? Okay.
Good.
That's so good. That's such a, talk about a great reframe. What do other people think about my spouse? And maybe I'll start there. Why do they see it that way?
Good point.
I have a funny story, real quick story I have to share with you guys. During this storm thing, we were, a couple of trees fell right in front of our truck. And Andy had to turn around, and we got into a parking garage, and there's lightning everywhere. And it was so funny in the moment. I kid you not. We've done so much work in our marriage and with the Primal Question. I was like, this is a Q1 nightmare. And then I go, and you're driving so well. I'm so proud of you. And Andy's like, oh my gosh. And I kept saying, this is a Q1 nightmare, but you're handling it so well.
That's so good. I love that. This is a Q1 nightmare. As a fellow Q1, Jen, I'm going to start using that with.
Oh my gosh!
It's a Q1 nightmare, but you're doing a great job right now.
Yes. Am I good enough, husband?
So good. And I think of myself, if that as a Q7, I would have needed to be like, okay, well, this is going to be purposeful. Something great will come out of this. We could do, the storm on every Primal Question.
That's
how we would react.
Absolutely. Everybody's going to have their own perspective of what those trees and that storm is, all based on their Primal Question. So. Ladies, thank you so much. What a great conversation. Jen, if people want to get connected into what you're doing, your coaching practice, how you're helping couples, what would those next steps look like?
I would, Instagram is honestly the easiest. I have a link there that they can schedule a free session with me. I love to schedule a free session because it's not always a good fit. And so it gives you 30 minutes to just really hear their story. I love for them to walk away with any kind of tips that they can take and apply immediately, because as we know, coaching is all about action. And so it's so hard to heal when you're just sitting, yes, we need to be still, but I love to get people into action and in motion. So find me on Instagram. It's at living_reframed. My links are there. Schedule a free session. And then we can see if I'm a good fit for you, because I may not be. And I'll also be assessing if your situation is a good fit. If I'm not 99.9% sure I can help someone, I definitely refer them out to somebody else, because it doesn't do anybody any good. But I mainly focus on rebuilding trust, reigniting intimacy. I do both men and women. I do couples. And I actually had some of my favorite clients. Honestly, I had a single woman that just really wanted to learn more about her Primal Question and prepare her for future relationships. And that was really fun, because if we can get them before where we're at after 29 years of marriage, imagine how powerful that is to equip yourself prior to some of these pitfalls that we can help people, avoid, basically.
Yeah, so good. So at living_reframed on Instagram.
Yep.
Specify, and then the links to explore possibly working with you are in your profile on Instagram. Great. Well, Jen, thank you so much for sharing. It's been incredible conversation, insightful. And I feel like I'm walking away just like with this action item of looking for every opportunity I can to reframe something, to get curious about something, and that as the pathway to fulfillment in my marriage. And I think in any relationship, really, what a great tool that is. Leigh, thank you for just your incredible counsel and insights. And listen, if you're listening, watching right now, I encourage you to go to primalquestion.com for more resources and videos and helpful information about the Primal Question. And then also, if you're interested in becoming a coach, you're like, hey, I want to help people in their relationships, or I want to help people grow. I want to help people understand their core needs. Again, primalquestion.com. There is a Become a Coach tab, and you can apply there at the website. And if you've enjoyed this conversation, enjoy these types of resources, I encourage you to subscribe so you'll keep getting these in your feed and you won't miss out on anything. Ladies, thanks again for sharing your incredible wisdom today. And we'll have to do it again really soon.
Love that. Thank you, Mike, for having me.
Thanks so much for tuning in to today's episode of the Primal Question podcast. I hope you've learned something new about your primal question, or maybe the primal question of someone you know. If you think this episode would be helpful to a friend, I encourage you, please share it. Let people know about the podcast and how it's impacted you by sending a link to a friend. If you're ready to take the next step in your own self-discovery journey, I invite you to visit primalquestion.com/podcast. That's primalquestion.com/podcast for additional free resources and to explore the opportunity to work one-on-one with a Primal Question coach. Also, for those of you who feel a calling to guide others on their journey, there's information available about how you can become a certified Primal Question coach yourself. It's a powerful way to transform lives, including your own.